Aloha and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the third and final virtual session of the US-Japan Cyber Forum, Building Interoperability and Security and Data Flow in Artificial Intelligence. Held with support from the US Embassy in Tokyo, the US-Japan Cyber Forum is a three-part webinar series focusing on three interdependent themes that underpin US-Japan cyber cooperation: defense, diplomacy, and development. Our current project builds on the successful outcomes of Pacific Forum's US-Japan cybersecurity cooperation beyond the Tokyo 2020 Olympics held in August 2021. To kick off our latest endeavor, we held the first virtual session of the US-Japan Cyber Forum entitled Advancing Cyber Defense and Resilience in the Age of Strategic Competition. In that session, we analyzed the current tempo of cooperation between the two allies, given the drastic changes in the international environment. The full key findings of the first session are now uploaded via the Pacific Forum website and can be accessed through the link shared in the chat box. The second virtual session, titled Strengthening International Cooperation Through Cyber Diplomacy, assessed the current efforts of the US and Japan in providing cyber capacity at the technical, policy, and strategic levels. The key findings for that session can also be found in the chat box now. Building on the key insights shared during the first and second virtual sessions, today's webinar, US-Japan Cyber Forum, Building Interoperability and Security and Data Flow in Artificial Intelligence, will focus on the implications of AI in cybersecurity. Three interrelated themes will be covered in this session: disruption, innovation, and cooperation. On disruption, the virtual session will tackle the disruptive implications of AI in cybersecurity. Here, speakers will explore how AI-enabled technologies can bolster offensive and defensive cyber capabilities and complicate joint operations and information sharing in the context of the US-Japan alliance. Relatedly, it will assess the rising threats of deepfakes and bots in the information environment. Speakers will also probe how the US and Japan can accelerate innovation and achieve greater interoperability in developing artificial intelligence in the commercial and military sectors through the exchange of talent, technology, and know-how among startups and tech companies. Finally, as the US and Japan seek to maintain or achieve their technological edge, speakers will also tackle how they can improve collaboration in shaping the rules, norms, and standards that will underpin the research, development, and deployment of AI-enabled applications. Before we jump to our discussions today, allow me to share some housekeeping rules. Please note that remarks made in today's program are on the record, and a video audio recording of this session will be made available to the public and also through the Pacific Forum website and social media in the future. The session will include feedback and Q&A with the audience. Participants' cameras are disabled throughout the session. However, during our Q&A discussion, participants will be allowed to unmute their mics to ask questions and also give feedback. Note that participants, you may submit questions in the Q&A box as you have them during the presentations. We also have an interactive feature like polling as we go along. We ask that everybody answer our poll questions to warm up our discussion. So our first poll for today is: how can the US and Japan maintain their competitive edge in artificial intelligence? Promoting a balanced approach to regulation and innovation to the private sector. Supporting regional and multilateral efforts to reduce the risks and harms of artificial intelligence. Collaborating with international technical standard-setting bodies. And lastly, integrating AI as part of existing cyber policy or capacity-building engagements. While we're waiting on those poll results, I'll note that we also have a survey we would like you all to complete after the event concludes. Please find the link to the post-event survey in the chat box. So the results are: first, integrating AI as part of existing cyber policy or capacity building engagements at 43%. We have in second, promoting a balanced approach to regulation and innovation to the private sector at 12%. It's supporting regional and multilateral efforts to reduce the risks and harms of AI at 29%. The third is promoting a balanced approach to regulation and innovation to the private sector at 21%. And lastly, collaborating with international technical standard setting bodies at 7%. Let's see how this changes, or at least the views of our audience changes or shifts as we go through the days, through today's webinar discussions. And leading the discussion today, of course, joining us is this very special expert from Japan. We have Dr. Ryo Hinata Yamaguchi. Dr. Hinata Yamaguchi is a project assistant professor at the Research Center for Advanced Science and Technology at the University of Tokyo and adjunct senior fellow at the Pacific Forum. Ryo-san has presented, published, and consulted on a variety of topics relating to defense and security and transport governance in the Indo-Pacific. Ryo-san previously served as a non-commissioned officer in the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, Reserve, and also held positions at the Busan National University, Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang, forgive me for that, FM Bird Entertainment Agency, at the International Crisis Group Seoul Office, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Embassy of Japan in Australia, and the Japan Foundation Sydney Language Center. Ryo-san received his PhD from the University of New South Wales, his MA in Strategic and Defense Studies, and BA in Security Analysis from the Australian National University, and was also a Korea Foundation Language Training Fellow. Thank you so much, Ryo-san, for being here and for joining us. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for the kind introduction. It's always a great pleasure to do work with the Pacific Forum and collaborate with you guys. Good morning from Saku, Nagano, Japan. My name is Ryo Hinata Yamaguchi, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to moderate the session of the US-Japan Cyber Forum, building on interoperability and security in data flow and artificial intelligence. And we're very delighted to have three renowned experts in alphabetical order. First, we have Hiroki Habuka, research professor, Kyoto University Graduate School of Law. And second up, we have Nor Long, research analyst, Center for Security and Emerging Technology. And third, we of course have Mark Manantan, Director of Cybersecurity and Critical Technologies at the Pacific Forum. Our first panelist will be Hiroki Habuka. Mr. Habuka is a research professor at Kyoto University Graduate School of Law, the CEO of Smart Governance, Inc., and a non-resident fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. His research focuses on innovation governance in digitalized society, which covers AI governance, privacy protection, data security, and digital platform policies. Before joining academia, he was the Deputy Director for Global Digital Governance at the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, where he served as a lead author of a series of white papers on agile governance, Governance Innovation Version 1 and Version 2, and Agile Governance Update. In 2020, he was selected by the World Economic Forum Global Future Councils on Agile Governance and Apolitical as one of the world's 50 most influential people revolutionizing government, Agile 50. Hiroki received a master's degree from Stanford Law School, and LM and Fulbright Fellow, and a Juris Doctor's degree from the University of Tokyo Law School, and is qualified to practice law in Japan and New York State. So, Habuka-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ryo-san, for the great kind introduction. And hello, everybody. It's my honor to speak here about what is going on in Japan on AI governance and also data-free flow initiatives. So I'm going to use my slide. Just a moment, please. I hope you can see it.
Yep, it's all good.
Great. So today I'm going to speak about 4 different topics: AI regulation, DA50 initiatives, G7 outcomes, and also US-Japan collaboration. So let me start from the AI regulation agenda or AI governance agenda. So in Japan, most of people are very happy to use AI technology and thinking about how we can apply these technologies to our society in a very positive and safe way. And here, always our goal is to maximize AI's positive impact on society. And the goal is not to, minimize the risks, but, optimize or maximize the positive impacts. So in order to do that, the emphasis is put on a risk-based, agile, and multi-stakeholder processes. And also we have a lot of legislation to promote use of regulation rather than controlling the risks of the regulation. I mean, regulation for AI legislation are actually very active compared with regulation on AI. So let me start talking about regulation on AI. So far, there is no general regulation such as EU's AI Act that constrains the use of AI in general. And also, there is no discussion to do it in the near future. So we have some regulations which is related to use of AI. For example, our Digital Platform Transparency Act requires large online platforms to disclose key factors determining their search rankings. And also the Financial Instrument and Exchange Act requires businesses that uses algorithmic high-speed trading to register and disclose some information. But the point is that these legislation or regulations are not like saying that you have to do this or you shouldn't do this, but instead it requires information disclosure. It's more like a transparency approach so far. Of course, if there is any big problems happening in the future, then maybe we have more strict regulations on AI. But so far, it's relatively light touch regulations. On the other hand, we have a lot of legislation promoting use of AI. For example, the Road Traffic Act and Road Transport Vehicle Act, revised in 2023, allows level 4 automated driving, which means full automation within designated areas. And so far, it is only for a public transportation providers, but maybe in the future, it will expand to more general automotive vehicles. And the second example is the Installment Sales Act, which was revised in 2020. This is a regulation about credit card companies or credit card services. And this amendment allows those businesses to determine credit scoring using data and AI. Of course, there is some conditions like a certain threshold of a payment failure or something like that. But basically, now the businesses can use AI and data to determine a credit score, credit amounts to consumers. The third example is the High Pressure Gas Safety Act, which allows factories using AI and drones for their inspection, safety inspections, without interrupting operations for up to 8 years, which is previously they were obliged to do stop the factories for inspection for every year. But if they use AI or drones or that kind of innovative technologies, and if they are certified, then you don't need to stop the factories annually anymore, which makes a big profit to the factories. The first example is 2017 amendment to the Copyright Act. That act clarifies that downloading data through the internet to develop AI model is not an infringement of copyright, meaning that if you use a content which is copyrighted originally only for the purpose of training machines, then it's not an infringement of copyright, which allows AI developers to use more data without the worry of infringing copyright. And so in general, we have a digital ad hoc commission, which is now trying to amend almost 10,000 regulations and ordinances on analog methods, which includes requirements for written documents, on-site inspections, periodic inspection, full-time stationing, or like so. So in general, we are trying to use more AI technologies in a society, and legislation is very active so far. So, and just recently, May 2023, the AI Strategic Council, which is like a headquarters of our AI strategies, issued a tentative note, issue note, And they says we have a lot of opportunities using AI, especially in Japan. We have certain degree of advanced research developments, and also our people, Japanese people, are basically very friendly to robotics or AI. And third, AI will bring a lot of solutions to demographic challenges, which is actually now a big problem to Japanese society or industry. And then, as a basic strategies, we try to lead international rulemaking, and we focus not only the risks of AI, but the risks of not using AI. And to achieve that, we are always considering the agile and multi-stakeholder approach, because society is changing a lot, technology is changing very fast, and now a lot of information or data necessary to govern the systems are actually held by each AI developers or like business sectors or communities rather than the government. So that's why we need a multi-stakeholder approach. So we expect AI developers and users to lead governance and risk management rather than the top-down approach given by the government. And through the process, transparency and reliability are vital. So how to design transparency mechanism would be one of the most important issues. And also transparency should be context-based. So there is no general regulations of transparency, but how to consider transparency in each different context and cultural background would be very important. So then second topic is DA50 initiatives. DA50 means data free flow with trust, which was initially issued by the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2020 in Davos. So the basic concept is relatively simple. So we need data-free flow to advance more innovation, especially regarding AI. But at the same time, we have to ensure data trust, especially in terms of privacy or security or IP rights. So in 2022, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry issued an interim report on D50. And actually there is already a final report available in Japanese, and we expect that the English translation will be issued shortly. But anyways, so there, in order to achieve a global D50, at least among like-minded countries like the US, we emphasize the importance of ensuring transparency, especially about the data regulations, because a lot of regulations are fragmented in each country. So ensuring transparency, especially about regulations, also technology and standardization, interoperability, complementary with related systems, and implementation of the 50 embodiment. So these are basic principles, but in the report, actually, there are a lot of details discussion going on, but due to the time constraint, I stop here. Then the third topic is G7 outcomes on AI and D50. So recently in April and May, we hosted G7 meetings, and both the G7 summit communique and the declaration of the G7 digital and tech ministers meetings discussed AI governance and D50. So today I focus on three pillars. The first one is the AI. So about the AI governance, first of all, the G7 countries agreed that there are policy differences among G7 members, so with some promoting comprehensive regulations for AI and others advocating for sector-specific guidance-based policies. So we admit that we have all different AI governance policies, but still we emphasize that there should be interoperability among AI governance frameworks to foster trustworthy AI. Okay, it sounds beautiful, but what does it mean actually is a question. So in the G7 documents, there are mainly two parts which supports interoperable governance framework. The first one is partnership with international initiatives, meaning that the initiatives by the OECD or UNESCO or GPA, GPA is a global partnership on AI. So those international and multi-stakeholder communities will help the governments to foster interoperable AI governance framework. The second pillar is supporting the international technical standards. Again, it is easy to say, it's important to say tech standards, which is relatively irrelevant to the social context. But my personal view is that the only technical standards cannot be a panacea. So we also need to consider about social technical and normative elements such as transparency or fairness that is not pure technical. And also it's important to clarify the link between regulation and standards. Otherwise, even if you have the same standards, still the companies should face the challenges of fragmented regulations. So technical standards are important, but it will not solve everything. Then about the DFFT, the G7 countries agreed to establish an institutional arrangement for partnership, which is called IAP. That is a principle-based, solution-oriented, evidence-based, and multi-stakeholder cross-sectoral cooperation initiative. And this is unique because it's not based on the pure concept of, safety, security, privacy, transparency, fairness, etc. Instead, it will be a solution-oriented, meaning that we collaborate to solve some problems rather than starting from the very conceptual discussions. So that initiative will be led by the OECD, and we are looking forward to what will be discussed in the IAP. And finally, under the emerging and disruptive technologies section, they discussed the policy package to foster innovation, which is proactive governance by actors, led by businesses, expert involvement, utilization of digital tools, agile regulatory governance, etc. So not only saying about the principles, but also this kind of actual policy package collaboration will be very important. So finally, a US-Japan collaboration, and I think this should be discussed after my presentation, so I will not go into specific initiatives. I just want to show that when we talk about international collaboration, it's always important to see what we are talking about. So there are some layers about governance. First, the value and the risks layer, and then principles layers. And the third one is governance by actors, mainly business actors, or sometimes the government actors, but anyways, the actors that develops or operates actual systems. And then finally, we have the fourth layer of the governance, which is about incentive mechanisms, including regulation and also economic incentive mechanisms, and also supporting tools for businesses to do better governance. So again, there are a lot of dimensions to be discussed, and it's important to first clarify that what layers we could collaborate. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Habuko-san. Great presentation. I think it's really detailed sort of overview of Japan's laws and regulations that really deserves a lot more attention. In order to understand not only the Japan's standpoint on things, but its strategy and capacity, and so forth. So there will be a lot of questions for you, I believe, later on. But before we go, before that, we have another great presentation coming up, which is by Noor Long. And so our second panelist, Noor Long, is a research analyst at CSET, as we talked about before, focusing on China's science and technology ecosystem, AI investment trends, and AI diplomacy in the Indo-Pacific region. She's also a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global China Hub. And prior to joining CSET, Noor worked at the Center for American Progress, where she researched China's industrial policy and 5G. Noor's work and commentary has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Nikkei Asia, Diplomat, and amongst many other outlets. Noor received her BA magna cum laude in International Politics and Economy from Middlebury College. She's enrolled as an MA candidate in Georgetown University Security Studies program with a concentration in technology and national security. So Noor-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. That was a really kind introduction, and thank you for having me today as well. Hiroki-san already kindly cover a range of important topics, and I will dive into two different areas that I would like to focus on my introductory remark today. One is the current state of AI collaboration between the United States and Japan. and two is the opportunities and challenges for both countries moving forward as they're trying to accelerate AI development and innovation. So first, over the past years or recent years, I might say, we've seen growing interest in emerging technologies from both countries. For instance, no one has really mentioned the Quad yet. Looking at the Quad's technology collaboration agenda alone, we've seen that emerging technologies like AI, semiconductors, biotechnology, quantum have really been increasingly important for not just for the US, Japan, India, and Australia, but also for the group as a whole. Each of the countries has their own AI strategies for a number of reasons. And there are also efforts to increase multilateral collaboration, with like-minded countries to help each other foster their own ecosystem in technology like AI. We've seen, a number of initiatives launched from the Quad Summit, for example, the Quad Investors Network and the Quad STEM Fellowship that are quite important. And specifically for the US and Japan, there's also been consistent joint high-level committees and meetings, as well as joint working level meetings where AI has been an important agenda for discussion for these groups. And so given the US and Japan share interest in AI development, last year at CSAT, we published a report that assesses the state of AI collaboration among all the Quad members, includes the United States and Japan as well. But I'll focus today on US and Japan AI collaboration. We're happy to talk about AI collaboration across all the Quad members if folks are interested in that in the Q&A later. But to do that assessment, we essentially looked at two different metrics. One is joint AI research collaboration, AI research publications, and two is investment flows into AI companies. The reason as to why we did this is because one, research collaboration is pretty much an important proxy for science and technology progress and innovation between countries. And two, the reason why we look at cross-border investment flow is because this indicator really helps us understand where exactly is the money going to help support development of AI, especially in the commercial sector. And also for us to understand how closely interlinked countries' financial ecosystems are to one another as well. And so when we look at the global AI research output, we see that the US is the second largest producer in AI papers, while Japan ranks fifth globally. Right? And we take this number, we broke it down by research fields in AI to really understand each country's competitive advantage, meaning their relative strengths in AI research. And we found that for the US, the country really excels in most fields, ranging from machine learning, data science, human computer interactions, as well as theoretical computer science. And for Japan, computer vision is the most important or popular field of AI research, representing about 15% of the overall AI research published by Japanese researchers. And two other fields that really stand out to us as well are control theory and human machine interaction. These two fields are linked to robotics research and development, which really explains Japanese progress in robotics development. And I should also say that equally interesting here from a competitive standpoint, Japanese researchers have published more AI papers in simulation research than American researchers. That's a really important note that we made in the report, because this really makes Japan a global leader in AI-related simulation research. And because scientific research doesn't really happen in a vacuum, we were interested in looking at or understanding the state of AI collaboration between American and Japanese researchers. So we, just generally speaking, US researchers really enjoy international collaboration much more than Japanese researchers. We saw that nearly half of the AI papers US researchers produce over the past decade were with international collaborators. And for Japan, it's only 30%. And when it comes to US and Japanese AI research collaboration, we see that it is quite an imbalanced partnership. The US is Japan's #1 AI research partner, but for the United States, Japan is ranked pretty far down at 10th place, taking part in only about 3% of the AI papers produced by US researchers. And if we look really closely at the kind of papers that American and Japanese researchers collaborated on mostly, we see that the most popular topic of research for these two partners is computer vision, right? But interestingly to us, though, the US is not even Japan's top research partner for computer vision, it's China, right? The gap here, though, is between China and the US is not very wide. Kind of related to that, China is also the top research partner for the United States for computer vision. And so if you put these two together, if there is interest to shift away from, having both Japanese and US researchers work with Chinese researchers to pivot to each other, it's a good, they are good partners to pivot to. Their concerns for the past, in recent years about research security with Chinese researchers. So this is an important and kind of a point that I want to make as well. And I'm going to kind of shift gear a little and talk about the investment community because they are so really important in fostering the US and Japanese AI innovation ecosystem in their own respective countries. But they also really, it's the key in linking the two countries' financial ecosystems to one another. And especially true when it comes to developing AI, because most of the AI development happens in the commercial sector, as we've seen. And so when it comes to the United States, the US has the most vibrant AI investment market, essentially. And for Japan, Japanese AI market trails behind the US, but it's still pretty active, right? So when we look at the current state of AI financial linkages between the two countries, we also see similar trends that we saw in the AI joint research. With respect to AI investment linkages, it's also an imbalanced partnership or relationship between these two countries. The US is Japan's #1 investor in Japanese AI companies. And for the US, Japanese investors are in 5th place. Japanese investors are particularly active in the US AI investment market. They have been involved in more than 300 investment transactions, total $14.5 billion between 2010 to 2021. And for the US, the US investors are less active in Japanese AI market, only taking part in less than 100 investment transactions, with a total of $900 million. And so this shouldn't be surprising to anyone here on the call today, because as I mentioned earlier, American AI investment market is quite more mature and more active. And also for anyone who's curious, the top AI investor from Japan in American AI companies is SoftBank. And for the US, it's a company called DNX Ventures, located in California. It's a VC firm. And I also want to note that, I talked about research publications and investment. These are really important, but also seen as separate from diplomatic initiatives and security concerns. By the same time, over the past years, we see that the US and Japan have shown commitment in technology collaboration. And so it's really important for them to really leverage their competitive advantages and, realign interests and commitments. And they can do so by tapping into their, research and investment community and getting closer diplomatically. And with that, finally, as informed by all the findings I mentioned today, we identified 4 different areas as next steps in which US and Japan can accelerate AI innovation together. The first one is stakeholders in Japan and the United States can align their research interests by establishing academic AI research collaboration initiatives. They can do that, where they can leverage their individual research strength to, for example, solve collective, problems like climate change. Like Japan and the US already have research exchanges on disaster prediction and simulation enabled by AI. But to put it more concretely, though, they can work on shared research topics, like I mentioned earlier. They can promote faculty and student exchanges between universities and research institutions. I should mention that some of the Japanese top research institutions are that have the highest citations per AI research papers since 2010 are actually Kobe University, National Institute of Informatics, and also Kyoto University, which is where our panelist is from. So that is needless to say, really great research done in AI over there. And the second area that I want to touch on is that, AI research really thrives on open source and open science. And the technology is also changing really fast. So to take full advantage of this, the US and Japan can advance in research together. The two countries really want to work together to identify, fast-growing areas of research. And of course, there are concerns about data sharing, especially when it comes to sensitive data that may have personally identifiable information. And so one way to circumvent this is to adopt a technique that is related to what we call privacy-preserving machine learning, which is used to share data for algorithm training without impeding on privacy or other sensitive technology that could be used for, say, defense-related research. And I'm going to try to go very fast in here. For AI investment, though, the two countries can pool capital together to fund startups, like how NATO did for the Innovation Fund. And then finally, they can coordinate on investment screening. This is speaking from the protect side of innovation in general, because there are certainly concerns about IP theft, certain concerns about their data sharing and information. So there's already been discussions about, especially in Washington, D.C., on how to restrict investment flowing outside the United States. So the U.S. government needs to be in conversation with allies like Japan, right, to talk about how to avoid backfilling, but also to share, the utility of outbound investment tool. So with that, I'll stop here and I look forward to a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, No-san. Fantastic presentation. I really like how you talked about sort of the research and investment side of things, which is really at the core of many of the developments and initiatives, right? And I also like to part about talk about so working with our partners. You talked at the Quad, and of course we can talk a lot about that in Q&A and discussion session, because we can't just talk about the bilateral relationship. We also need to think about how the bilateral relationship can link with other partners. Great. So the third and final speaker is going to be Mark Brian Manantan. Mark Brian Manantan is the Director of Cybersecurity and Critical Technologies at the Pacific Forum in Honolulu, Hawaii. Mark is a non-resident fellow at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, National Cheng Chi University in Taiwan, and formerly a research consultant at the Asia Society Policy Institute, Washington, D.C. Mark has held visiting fellowships at the Japan Foundation, the Center for Rulemaking Strategies at Tama University in Tokyo, Japan, and the East-West Center in Washington, D.C. At the forum, Mark currently leads the implementation of Cyber ASEAN, a cyber capacity building and development initiative in Southeast Asia's cyber conflict and resiliency. So with that, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rio. And I think I don't have any substantive sort of information that I could share and add to the wonderful remarks that my previous speakers have made. And we really try, before I begin with my remarks, really try to reach out to an American speaker as well based in DC. But due to scheduling conflicts and other priorities, unfortunately, we weren't able to do so, but I was very much amazed and blown away by our two previous speakers, and I try to follow up hopefully sustain the lead and the momentum that they've established. So building on the insightful interventions of our two speakers, let me offer just three perspectives that would hopefully elevate the current discussions on AI and data flow within the context of the US-Japan cyber cooperation. Some of the ideas already have been laid out perfectly by Noor and Haruki-san. And I think I would offer this 3C approach: communication, contextualization, and collaboration. So let me begin with this concept of communication. So I think there is, these are like sort of the dominant sort of narrative that currently revolves, or at least shapes, the narrative of US-Japan US-Japan cooperation, artificial intelligence is very much on competition. And in AI innovation in the context of alliance or security partnership, and this sort of idea of an AI arms race against adversaries like China and Russia, I think has really negative implications moving forward. And as we all know, competition has set the tempo of AI innovation development, where the conventional argument is that China is potentially leading the race because of its untethered capacity of collecting and analyzing billions of data that advances more sophisticated machine learning or deep learning algorithms. Also, under China's military-civil fusion, there has been unprecedented cooperation between state-owned companies and also the People's Liberation Army and private entities. And in recent years, it became apparent that China is no longer just the pacing challenge for the United States, but I think China is the existential challenge to US primacy and dominance, not just in the tech domain, but also around the concept of international rules-based order. So with the revival of industrial policies like CHIPS Act and Science Act, and overtures of friendshoring and onshoring, concepts of an economic strategy that originated from years and years of repeated calls for decoupling, the US and Japan are determined to cut China out. Let me be clear that competition is not a bad thing. In fact, I believe competition is an engine that inspires creativity and innovation. However, we should also be aware of its limitations. The idea of an AI arms race that is based on a winner-takes-all attitude could be the main source of risks and harms, which ultimately undermines confidence, trust, and reliability, all concepts we espouse to keep AI safe and secure. And this onus applies to all parties. By aiming to secure the first mover advantage, scientists, data analysts, and AI specialists and engineers could advertently or inadvertently sacrifice critical steps that would ensure security. Also, by seeking to cut competitors out of the game like China, the imminent risk of creating differing standards on AI is very likely. And this is already evident in the cyber domain with the splinternet phenomenon. And so alienating China or Russia from the AI conversation will eventually create divergent AI systems that could pose a whole suite of new risks and harms. Of course, it would be difficult to really temper the mood of competition given the current circumstances. In China, again, is now seen as the existential challenge for the US. And there is this very high alignment between the US and Japan on this front, especially at the political level. And so any form of cooperation is really going to be difficult. And I think this echoes what Noor has mentioned, that I think hope lies among the companies, the businesses, the entrepreneurs, the researchers like us, and also civil society representatives and organizations in keeping the lines of communication open. It is very difficult in the current environment given the trust deficit that prevails between DC and Beijing, but it appears that China is still open to working with leading US tech companies like Microsoft and Apple, who are leading efforts in AI tech development. Of course, we need to consider, as Noor has mentioned, investment screening, all the guardrails involved. But I hope that the recent visit of Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the promise of a reciprocal visit from Chinese Foreign Minister can hopefully open lines of communication, particularly on the eminent risks and harms that AI or generative AI like ChatGPT poses. The second part of my recommendation is shifting the AI narrative and considering contextualization. As I said, there is a high level of alignment between the US and Japan to collaborate towards strengthening cyber and AI collaboration. But what would make the collaboration more productive is highlighting this notion of contextualization. While AI very much relies on international collaboration, local context and perspectives still matter. According to the 2023 Human-Centered AI study from Stanford, 42% of Japanese feel that AI has more benefits and drawbacks, while in the United States, only 25% of the American population shares this sentiment. Although the gap is not really striking, this should point out to the varying philosophical culture that animates American and Japanese perceptions of artificial intelligence and other related technologies like robots. According to robot ethics scholar Naho Kitano, Japanese Shintoism dictates a dominant affinity for the eminence of spirits in all things that includes robots. Kitano-san finds that the Japanese have the willingness to connect with the animating spirit that goes beyond the look of the robot's inanimate facade. On the contrary, Americans have a focus on the primacy of humanity due to Western philosophical culture. This means that in Western philosophy, creating human life leads to the destruction of its creator. The Japanese look at robots that are man-made yet with spirit. Today, we see how these differing perceptions shape Japanese and Americans in building AI-enabled technologies like robots. Americans value emotionally expressive robots, while Japanese are content with inferred or muted emotions. Confirming these views, Christopher Mims published a study 13 years ago stating that while the Japanese culture looks at robots as helpmates and equals, imbued with something akin to the Western conception of a soul, Americans consider robots as dangerous and willful constructs that will soon cause the destruction and death of their makers. Americans have directed much of their efforts in robotics for military applications, while the Japanese are more interested in investing in consumer robots aimed to support their aging population. Therefore, understanding the context of how Americans and Japanese view AI-enabled technologies like robotics in the future and its application to lethal and autonomous weapons will therefore be crucial in building interoperability. As a dual-use technology that has military and commercial applications, public perception of our AI-enabled technologies will continue to impact its development. With the enthusiasm of the United States and Japan to ramp up partnerships and investments across startups, tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and multinational tech companies, valuing the local context or perspective should not be dismissed. As much as AI is an international phenomenon, its linkage to local purpose and application is equally important. Finally, let me end with this concept of collaboration. While this project talks about increasing US-Japan coordination and all things cyber, data, and AI, and also we discuss about Quad and other relevant minilateral arrangements, we should recognize that cyber and critical technology is borderless. The US and Japan cannot do it alone. We have interesting innovations happening elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly those in emerging economies in my home, Southeast Asia, as well as those in South Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. Therefore, expanding the network of research and development, industry outreach, funding opportunities in the field of AI and cyber is fundamental to sustaining, if not elevating, the US and Japan's competitive edge. China is already ahead of the game with its provision of the Digital Silk Road Initiative, with its ongoing work and consultation through Cyber ASEAN. Pacific Forum found that Chinese companies like Huawei are investing heavily in training the next generation of experts and engineers, specializing in AI, cyber, and even quantum tech through the provision of scholarships and institutional partnership. China understands that the global South will soon be the biggest market for ICT products and services. The sheer amount of the global South's young demographics make the global South an important stakeholder that will shape its rules, norms, and standards of critical technologies like artificial intelligence. Of course, Japan and US have worked tirelessly to compete with China, and the US has the digital connectivity and cybersecurity partnerships that aid partner countries through capacity building and promotion of ICT investments. And also, as extensively discussed throughout the series, Japan is a highly respected partner among countries in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Africa when it comes to cyber capacity building. But given the rapid mobilization of China, the US and Japan need to move a lot faster. Both countries are still considered as the leading technological frontier in cyber and critical tech like AI, and therefore increasing human capital opportunities beyond short-term training or reskilling should be the longer-term priority of both the US and Japan involving countries in the global South. Once again, I thank my fellow panelists, and I look forward to all the questions during the discussions. And back to you, Rio.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Again, as always, I learn a lot from your insights. And I really like, your sort of connections to sort of the cultural differences in between US and Japan, which is really going to be important in sort of shaping sort of perceptions and also ethical values, regarding any kinds of technologies, for that matter. And obviously, that's something that's going to be very important when we think about sort of not just like cooperation between US and Japan, but also many other states, as you have mentioned. And so we now are going to move on to questions, the Q&A session. And so again, I thank all the panelists for sharing your great insights on US Japan cybersecurity diplomacy. And so we're now going to invite a lot of questions to the panelists. We already have one, but I'm actually going to sort of use my position as the moderator and ask some questions of my own, if I may. And so one of the things I sort of learned and so got from the three presentations was about how the US and Japan can do more or should do more, but we also hinted towards like working with others as well. We're not just we're not just talking about sort of this bilateral partnership. We're also thinking about how we can use a bilateral partnership and network and work with other countries. And so, no, you talked at the Quad, right? And Mark, you talked at Southeast Asia. You talked at Southeast Asia, and Hyoki-san, you also talked about sort of the frameworks in which we can work in and so forth. And so, what I'd like to ask the three panelists is, well, who are some of the partners that we can work with, or who we should work with? When I say partners, I'm not just talking about states. You talked about how companies are at the center of many of these initiatives. So let's think about that as well, right? You don't have to name a particular company, but you may have some certain countries that may not be a major player in geopolitics, but are major players in technology, right? Because they may have certain companies. And so I was wondering if you could talk about that, and what are some of the issues going forward, right? And so of course there's some countries that we can talk about, like South Korea, so forth. But are there any others? Does anyone want to take that, or should I just go by the order I see on the program here? If not, maybe okay, Hiroki-san, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for the great question. So first of all, in terms of government, I think all democratic, like-minded countries should be in the circle of developing new rules for trustworthy or a responsible AI discussion. So just like I introduced, the G7 countries are totally on the same table to discuss further role of development, but also other democratic countries, of course, including South Korea, are most welcome to join the discussion. So that is my first point. And of course, the collaboration with the private actors are really, really important, because nowadays, all essential information which is necessary for better rule making or standard setting is actually held by the private sectors, typically big tech companies, but also like NGOs or NPOs or academics or maybe audit companies. So collaboration with those companies are very, very important. And especially about the technical part with the leading tech companies, and also especially about ethical part with local communities, because as we just discussed, a contextual conversation. Understanding the context is very important, and actually it was confirmed by the G7 summit statement as well. So like ethical part or social part or social technical part is essential to involve the not only the government but also more local communities. And there will be some rooms for us academians to contribute to the discussion, because it's really difficult for most of people to understand what is the key point to consider in terms of transparency, of fairness, of privacy with respect to the specific technical services or innovations. So maybe academia could help to connect those different stakeholders, including the private companies, the tech companies, and communities, local people, and also the government. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So No-san?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. That's a really important question. And I think a lot of us researchers, as well as, obviously policymakers from, Japan and the US and also other relevant countries have been thinking about. And with respect to the Quad countries, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is the fact that, Japan has closer links to the United States and, to some extent China as well. Then they do have that relationship with, Australia, Australia and India. So the three Indo-Pacific countries don't really work together when it comes to, AI research and investment, within their own or across their financial ecosystem. And so, one of the things that was mentioned in the Indo-Pacific strategy from the US is the fact that the Biden administration has been trying to say, well, we're back. We are back in the Indo-Pacific region, but also has been trying to encourage, allies and partners to work really closely with one another, as opposed to having, a hub and spoke model where the US is at the center. The US is trying to encourage more partners and allies to, get closer to one another. So there's a lot of opportunities for Japan to collaborate more with India and Australia, especially when, all four countries are a part of that grouping. Although it's quite informal, like they still, meet annually, but there are working groups. For example, one of the things that I love to see from the Quad Summit recently is, there are more development coming out from the Quad Investors Network, which is basically, it's a very good start when it comes to bringing together investors that have similar goals to increase access to capital for emerging technologies, within and across the Quad countries. So it's a really good first step for all stakeholders to come together, at least, at the level where there are conversations flowing, as Mark has been, advocating for as well, keeping the lines of communication open for really important stakeholders to communicate. And another thing that I should mention is one other research effort that CSET has already done and published is, we look at Chinese activities in Southeast Asia, but beyond that, we see that Japan also has a lot of presence when it comes to investment in Southeast Asia. There are, like Mark said, Japanese economic actors, like investors, are respectable and dependable partner in a lot of Southeast Asian countries. And so there's an opportunity for Japan to develop more, or improve strategies when it comes to, going outside to other key regions that are quite important. And needless to say, Southeast Asia is growing in terms of, their digital economies and internet connectivity. So there's a lot of opportunities down there in that region.
Yeah, Ryo-san,
Yeah.
just to, I think, build on some of the key points that Hiroki-san and Ngor have mentioned already. I think three things. Path dependence. I think the reason why we sort of have this dynamic that Japanese looks to US looks, this kind of sort of path dependence that has developed throughout decades of collaboration. And I think something that not just the Quad members, not just the AUKUS, not just the Trilateral Security Dialogue, has looked into. And I've advocated this for so long, at least here in Hawaii and, facing Southeast Asia, that there's this really comfortability that the US has and the Japanese has amongst themselves. And like I said, technology is borderless. And China is not just like looking into, it's not just looking to the present, it's looking to the future. Well, a few of the unsuspected, I think, promising and actors are the unicorns and decacorns in Southeast Asia. Again, building on Ngor's point about Tokopedia, Bolokapa, and Alibaba and Huawei are investing in those countries. And those small unicorns and decacorns in that region are really pioneering a lot of AI-enabled technologies. Of course, I wouldn't say that Microsoft and AWS and Google are not partnering with these local, tech startups. But what I'm saying is China is, again, ahead looking into the future where the market of ICT is. And I think the last point that I'd make, and also, although this is not, we talk about AI security, Japan has been really good in using trade negotiations and agreements like the CPTPP to promote data free flow with trust and hopefully AI standards and regulations. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, thanks. Three great responses. And yeah, and I think all of you guys, you raised some really important issues here, like when it comes to collaboration from various angles. And so I do have one great question that has just popped up on Q&A box. But before I go into that, just as a reminder for everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please, put them in either the Q&A window or use the raise hand function and in the webinar controls, and we will address them accordingly. Okay. And the raise hand function is accessible in the participants hub on the Zoom screen. And if you do, if you raise your hand to ask a question verbally, the host will enable your microphone and ask you to unmute yourself. But if you are going to be in a call, please make sure that you keep your questions short and concise, to give others a chance. Okay. So in meantime, I do have one great question that has popped up. It's from Eric Nielsen Yavia, which is, what are the qualities of good technology development partners? How can Southeast Asian states contribute or factor in the AI race? And this really connects with the discussion that we just had, right? And so again, does anyone particular want to take a stab at this first, or same order? Okay, so Hiroki-san, you want to go first? Do you have any idea on that?
Okay, thank you very much. So okay, so let me talk about this agenda from the perspective of trustworthy AI. So as I repeated in this session, what we need in our society is not a mere AI, but a trustworthy or responsible AI, which was also agreed by the G7 and other democratic countries. And again, it's on the other hand, the how to balance some different values like privacy or transparency or maybe the utility of the services. And so the balancing of these different values, which sometimes or actually often conflict, is a very difficult challenge. So in that sense, there are several layers of collaboration. First of all, we could agree on what processes, what kind of democratic processes should be incorporated into AI development. And so democracy is not only that, you vote for some parliament members and the parliament members will decide the rules and we have to follow the rules. So this is one form of democracy, but in the age of digitalization, we could expand the concept of democracy into more specific services or architecture or digital architectures. So, and how to actually realize the democratic values in the product development would be one of the areas for collaborations. And in terms of that, I think there are a lot of opportunities for not only Japan and US, but also Southeast countries as well, because now we are starting to really incorporate technologies into society. And now all countries are, positively discussing on how to make rules for minimize the risks and maximize the positive impacts of the technologies. And the process would be collaborated we have some consensus on good procedures based on best practices from Southeast Asian countries, because I think not only Japan, but most Southeast Asian countries also have a very, very kind of positive or friendly image to technologies, and also there are a lot of needs to incorporate those technologies into the society. So not only from the top-down rule-making side, but also bottom-up rule-making side, there are a lot of actual projects going on under the Southeast Asian countries, and there are a lot of things to learn to Japan from those different countries' initiatives. This is my comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Non-san, you want to you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there are, absolutely rule of thumbs for, good qualities for partnerships. But I can speak to the fact that, partnership is a two-way street. It's a give and take kind of relationship. Both sides will have to get returns from that collaboration. So one way to kind of locate areas where, there are aligned interests and incentives to collaborate is to look for, topics or ways to solve collective problems. And one of the things I already mentioned is, disaster prediction or climate change, where a lot of countries do have shared interest in that area because it does affect everyone when it comes to, sea level rising and global warming, things like that. And on, best practices as well, there are definitely, interest to share how to do certain things in the best most productive way that Hiroki-san already mentioned. There are also other low-hanging fruit areas. For example, there are a lot of concerns about how to develop AI more safely. So AI safety is also an area where I see countries showing more interest. For example, needless to say about demand for automated vehicles or self-driving cars. There's definitely a market demand for that already. So, with that in mind, governments from different countries already been thinking about, how to push for certain standards for to make sure that AI safety is one of the things that developers have in mind when they in the research and design process for certain of their for products that they putting out in the market. So that is, those are the things that I think are good areas where we see common interests, not necessarily best practices, but not necessarily good qualities, for partnership, but kind of like an overlap between many different countries with many interests.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I think they captured everything. I have nothing to add to the great points that Hiroki-san and Laura has mentioned.
Okay. And so I guess we're still waiting on some questions. And so again, for those of you in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the Q&A box, or raise your hand. In meantime, because we do still have some time left, and I want us to exploit our experts as much as we can. I know we touched on this, over and over again, but I think we need to sort of circle back to it because it is important. We talked about standards. We talked about sort of bridging efforts, bridging laws and regulations, and various other things. But I thought we could talk a little bit more about ethics. Because we did again touch on it, but this is really at the center of a lot of the debates regarding AI. I do a lot of work on defense. That's what most of my work is on, and I do touch on AI like in areas of command and control, but there are a lot of questions about how AI should be used in defense sector, right? For obvious reasons. Now, I know like in our session, we're talking not just about defense, but also just like in security and also just like, AI use in overall society. But I was wondering, like, we obviously need to bridge ethical values and perceptions or ethical perceptions and so forth. But I was wondering like whether like there are going to be fairly big challenges. It might not be so great between the US and Japan so much, but if we start to work with some states in other parts of the world that may not be sharing some liberal democratic values or may have some special ways of exercising them, I was wondering how much of that is going to be a barrier going forward. Right now, we can say, well, we can't work with these guys, but we have to work with other countries, no matter what, when it comes to technology, right? Regardless of geopolitical issues or not. So I was wondering, I know it's a really sort of elementary question, but I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts on that. So in this case, I guess you're just like first come first serve. So anyone want to take a stab at that first? Thanks.
Yeah, I can jump in, kind of also speak from the US perspective too, because there been growing conversations around, how to regulate AIs, but also in the commercial sector, because, with OpenAI's GPT-4, it's definitely getting traction and attention, especially from the public, because now everyone has access to it. Everyone is asking, what did things go wrong? So, like along this line, there's also a conversation about how to, because the input of the algorithm is data, right? How do we make sure that the data that we are using to train certain algorithms are, unbiased and also not going to generate outputs that could potentially harm society? So that is another thing, that US policymakers have been trying to really nail down when it comes to what kind of framework do we want to develop. Like NIST has a framework on, AI risk and management. But how do we actually implement that? I think we're still in the process of trying to, understand what enforcement actually looks like. And you've probably been seeing a lot of hearings on the Hill, lately, with policymakers, but also with different stakeholders like CEOs of, AI companies coming to chat for our government to really understand like how to best move forward with this. But with AI ethics, I should also say that, the priority here is to get things in-house in order for the United States, for Japan, for other countries. And then we can come together and align what exactly is going on here. When we say AI safety, in the NIST framework, does that mean the same thing in the AI strategy in Japan? Does that mean the same thing in the EU, right? Like, how do we actually align the definition so that when a term is mentioned, like transparency or interoperability, it's all really important to get that in order.
Yeah, and like I think like when it comes to authoritarian states, I think it's fairly obvious, right? What the issues are. But I also find that, like, not just AI, but many others, like, we often find issues when it comes to states that are so semi-democratic and so semi-authoritarian, right? And because there are also like some, traps that you find as you go along. Hiroki-san, or Mark, do you want to take a stab at that question? First. Yep. Okay.
I can jump in. So
yep.
First of all, when we talk about AI regulation or governance, we always have to focus on the use of AI rather than the technology of AI itself.
Yeah.
And that's why we really have to think about the ethics. And of course, like using AI for intentionally deceive people, like emitting disinformation to practice democracy would be a bad use case. That kind of activity should be to some extent restricted. But actual question is not that easy. For example, actually, I was in Florence until the day before yesterday, and we discussed about the some generative AI governance. And there we discussed about the automated advertisement generation, which was actually is going to be started by the Google. If the user types some text like a skincare product for men 30s, mid 30s, or like so, and then the Google automatically produces a good advertisement text for some advertisers who pays for Google, and also it enables the function also enables the advertisers to make a good image of the product, which is not exactly the same thing as the products they sell, but they could make some images of like a fresh fish or fresh meat. And is that a problem or not? And our first instinct would say that, oh, maybe it's risky because it might make a fake image, which is not exactly the same thing that you get as a user. But think about what is actually the actual practice of advertisement these days. For example, if you watch the TV commercial of McDonald's, you'll see fresh burgers and crispy potatoes, but which is not exactly the same as what you get in the actual McDonald's. But nobody thinks it's a misinformation, disinformation, because we understand that there might be some exaggeration included. So then why we need a new regulation if only the image or text is generated by the AI? So we have to seriously think about it. I don't say which is a good or bad approach, but anyways, we have to think about it. And also about transparency, it's almost impossible for the generative AI service providers to disclose all contents that was used to train the AI, because they just collect all data and information from all internet. And unlike patent, the copyright is generated automatically after some human beings create some context. So it's impossible to disclose all copyrighted information to use to train data unless you strictly limit the data which you can use for training AI. But is it really good for the society or not? I mean, if you just require to disclose all copyright information to use to train the model, then maybe the model will be much less accurate or useful, and which may bring a bad effect to the society, or even, for example, the fairness of or accuracy of the output of the AI. So is that really necessary to disclose all information about the AI? So this is about the transparency question, or about the copyright. Like Japan, there might be an understanding that if the copyrighted data is used only to train the data and not enjoyed by human beings, then it's not an infringement of the copyright. That could be one change of mindset about when we think of copyright. So likewise, there are a lot of nuanced and tailor-made discussions for each system services and also each principles. So we really have to think about the risk of just disregarding all these differences and just putting a single and very simple and strict regulation. So when we talk about ethics, again, it's totally contextual and also strongly related to the cultures of the people. So I think what we need is the mechanisms to implement those nuanced cultures into the actual practice or actual rulemaking.
Okay. Thank you. Mark,
Yeah, I just very quickly, I think more, and again, Hiroki-san fabulously touched on the salient points, but I'll just add this sort of provocation that I think we should be very careful in throwing buzzwords such as transparency, reliability, responsible AI, human-centric AI, just to give us a full sense of security and morality.
Yeah.
I think with the wave of AI regulation, with the EU AI Act, I think released last week, with, again, more talked about all these hearings in the Capitol Hill, and also Southeast Asia just this week released this, they had this meeting at the ASEAN Digital Ministers meeting to come up with AI guidelines because of the imminent threat of ChatGPT, blah, blah, blah. I think we should be very careful about regulation per se, that although we produce all these guidelines and soft laws and frameworks, that we are doing a good job. Because I think no one has thought about to what end are we doing AI innovation anyway. And we've seen in the past that there are technological innovation, for example, like Concorde, who was, touted to change the aviation game. But because of the risks and harms that it poses and the noise and all the other expenditures that is related to it, the production and eventually its, lift off has been suspended indefinitely. And for us here in this group, and also, everyday life we touch with AI-enabled technologies, we shouldn't be espousing this AI technological determinism that AI will serve everything. And I think rather than just really catching up with regulations and frameworks and guidelines, it's important to take a pause. And what does it really mean? As Hiroki-san mentioned this word about tailor-made, about context, and more mentioned about what are the benefits? How are we really just advancing AI because of the economic benefits? But are we sacrificing human dignity? Are we sacrificing privacy? And so I think those are the uncomfortable questions. They sound, very abstract and philosophical, but at the end of the day, it's really our relationship with technology that will define our future as a society. So I'll leave it there.
Great, thanks.
So,
Yeah, so I was
really,
just gonna say,
you open a can of worms here.
yeah, I know.
Really great insights. And I agree that lip service is definitely, something that we should be avoiding. Absolutely. But I also want to acknowledge that, when it comes to AI regulations, there is, I think there's still a need for, at least at the highest level, some sort of conversations about how to create a parameter, at least to signal to developers or relevant stakeholders to really understand what degree is the stuff that you develop in the products that you're putting out is safe enough for the public to use, so you can generate that trust. Without trust, people are not going to use your product or not going to use that very safely. So how do we signal to these people, the developers, the producers of that, the right way to develop certain products or to advance AI moving forward, so that we're not impeding on innovation or stopping that at current level. So.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, and we can even open up like a whole session on that, for that matter. But we are actually now running out of time. So does anyone else have any last sort of comments, any sort of burning comments that you want to sort of make before we close off? Anyone? Nope.
Just one comment.
Yep,
yeah,
sure.
From my side, like rule making governance are just like a system development. So it's a social systems, meaning that we can learn only from a failure. So instead of banning everything from the first glance, maybe we can start from the lighter regulation, and then maybe that might fail. That might fail some problem. Then we can update the regulation in a swift manner. Well, it doesn't need to be a regulation, but there's, for example, standards or like guidances. So that kind of agile and flexible approach should be necessary for this kind of cutting edge and fast changing technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, no, anyone? Last comments? Nope. Nor, you good? Good. Okay, fantastic. All right, so we've used up all our time now, and so we'd like to thank all the participants for sending your questions, and of course the panelists for sharing their great insights. And again, there's not enough time. In time flies in the most productive sessions, and this is one of them. Okay, and so again, thank you to everyone for actively participating in this session. I would like to thank the Pacific Forum for this kind invitation for this webinar, and with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mark. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Rio. And again, thank you so much, Ruki-san and Moore, for joining us. It's just been really a great way of wrapping up this webinar series with having both of you share your insights, and especially to Haruki-san, who's been one of the pioneers in Japan as a visiting fellow in Japan Foundation and also at the World Economic Forum. I followed your work intently on data free flow. It's just a great sort of to have you here today, and also to Moore and Rita and the rest of the team at CSAT. We really appreciate the continuing partnership we have with you, and we look forward to working with you more. And lastly, of course, to our colleagues at RCAST, Todai, with Rio-san over there. This has been a collaboration that we've been talking about, and hopefully more conversations, more meetings in Hawaii soon happens. And again, we'd like to thank the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo and the Research Center for Advanced Science and Technology, RCAST, at the University of Tokyo for making this event possible. And also on behalf of Pacific Forum, we thank our panelists, Mr. Hiroki Habuka and Ms. Moore Long. I'd also like to remind all our participants of our post-event survey, which we will share once again in the chat box. Please, if you have any feedback, take a few minutes to complete it and share your thoughts about today's webinar so we can improve our future sessions and make it as engaging and productive as possible. Thank you once again for your support throughout the US-Japan Cyber Forum, Defense, Diplomacy, and Development. We truly appreciate all our speakers who shared their thoughts and expertise throughout the past 6 months, as well as all the participants who really raised important points and questions throughout this endeavor. We hope that all of you continue to engage with us here at the Pacific Forum Programming. And like I said, we've been working tirelessly to deepen collaboration with US and Japan in the area of cyber and critical technology. And we hope that we continue to do so in the future. Please stay tuned for more details of our programming here at the Pacific Forum by following us on social media. And also you can find more about our publications through pacforum.org. And again, I'm Mark, and I'm Director of Cyber and Critical Tech at the Pacific Forum. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Mahalo, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.